Hello, hi. Good morning, and we are on with week number 10 of this class. This is going to be our last class on the subject of academic research within Christian context. So we have been discussing about how this academic research would apply to a given Christian context, whether it's a church, whether it is a non-profit organization, or whether it's a school like ours. And the importance of the research for the Christian leaders, the pastors, the teachers, and even those parents who are raising children. And last week we have discussed on the biblical so-called research. Biblical research is how you do the research of the biblical material. And then we have just one topic on that still need to discuss. The publication. Once you do the research and the documentation, as we have discussed last week, this was like a documentation, how you make a note of it. And then eventually it becomes writing, and then writing becomes a book or books. And when you have a meaningful documentation, then you want to share that with others for the benefit of others. And when that happens, it becomes the topic of publication. Some of you may have written a book or two already. And I have written several theses or the dissertation, and then some books I have published in Korea, in Korean, with the ministry I have worked with, or helped to produce with some others. So I have some little experience of publication myself, but I'm not those so-called authors or publishers. Yeah. Anyway, when you are trying to publicate or the publish your writings, first thing that you need to consider is how wide is the audience. For example, the topics that I have studied is for the micro audience, meaning there are only a few handful who would be interested in my writing. For example, my dissertation, doctoral dissertation, was the mission of diaspora or diaspora mission, which is very small readers, because you have to be first a diaspora, and then you have to be someone who is doing the diaspora mission. Unless you are doing those, that the research is not so relevant, meaning it's not so meaningful for them. So that was kind of micro audience. The macro audience is much broader. It's general public. So, for example, if you have written something about prayer, there will be every Christian would be interested in prayer. Or if you have written something about the Holy Spirit, That will be a more general, like a macro audience. So you have to have who the kind of picture who is going to be the possible or expected readers. That determines the audience, and depending on, it can be a micro production or macro production. Now, second agenda that you need to consider is, are you going to write a formal or informal writing? It depends on. Formal writings are such as dissertation or thesis. These are very formal kind of writings, which means it does require quotation and exact notes, footnotes, and bibliography, and so on. But when it is informal, it doesn't have to have a certain style or the formation. So that's kind of different. Many of you would have written some informal writings, just your thoughts, essays, and just one couple page articles and so on. Those are informal. But the book report, school reports, the term papers, these are the examples of formal writings. And some of those writings are so good that you want to share with others, and that becomes publication. And the pastors usually in a church, you are going to have an opportunity to publish your writings weekly, usually. I mean, on the Sunday bulletin, some churches print or publish the pastor's thoughts. Even if it's a short one, as publication. So you will be able to publish your writings, and that's a good opportunity, because that you continue to be able to develop your writing skills. Then the articles and books. When it becomes a book, it's not so much a matter of the pages, number of pages, but it's the way you publish your writings. So that's about it, and let's continue with the next topic, which is a lesson. Library research, lesson 4. This is one of the main research when you are doing so-called academic research. You cannot avoid to do the library research when you are doing any kind of academic research, whether it's a term paper or just a short report, even a short 5-page report. You need to do some library research. Library research, basically, you are going to read related books and articles. See, even if you want to read some articles, you have to find the related magazine or journals, so-called journals. You may not be familiar with this. Journals are the professional magazine on the given topic. For example, let's say there's a magazine called Leadership. That's usually a monthly publication, and it's not that thick, and it's not like a fancy, colorful kind of design, but it's just looks like a book, and sometimes it looks like a notebook, but they have very important information to publication about the leadership every month. So those are like journals, and the journals are sometimes it's a key resource from the most recent development on the particular subject. So the journals are very important resources in doing library research. But when you go to a library, whether it's a Christian library or just public library, there are a lot of different resources, ranging from the books, encyclopedia, dictionaries, and the journals, of course, newspaper. You'll find the newspaper in the library, and you'll find the medias, the CDs, video tapes, and then audio tapes, all these things in the library. So library becomes a very major resource for your research. So let's continue with this library research. What is, I just told you, value and importance. If you're writing a thesis or dissertation, for example, and even a term paper, like a 10-page or 10 to 15 pages, double space, writing research paper on particular class. Usually, I mean, at the college level, just like ours, or university level, 4 years college, we do require a one term paper and plus final test to evaluate, at least to evaluate your progress. So the term paper usually is a must for any class in a college, usually in the American system. And if you're doing a term paper, professors usually, I mean, probably 100% of the time, they require you to do the library research. So that's that much significance and importance. And that means without library research, you are not going to be able to write any sort of research paper. So that's that much important. And first thing that you do an academic research and to write any meaningful, a formal research paper, that you need to go to the library and do the library research. That's very, very first thing that you do as a researcher. So that's that much important. Why do you need the library research? Because today, I mean, you'll be able to do the online, so-called online research. But even those online research is an internet version or online version of library research, because you are dealing with the books and publications. So any form of a publication, if you have that stored in a systematic way, and we call that as library. And you have to do it. Go into that library to find the information, data, and the ideas, and the knowledge, and then all the good researches, especially those previous researches you want to find, you need to go to the library. That's why. So where and how, we'll discuss that on the later session. Number one, institutional library research. These are the very formal and institutionalized. And first, you have something called public library. Any developed country and society would have a public library system. Actually, the public library system is one good measure whether it's a developed country or not. So better the country, better developed, they have better public library system. For example, in America, almost every small city in America, they have at least one public library that is named after that particular city. Means each city, it has one public library of their own. And most those small public libraries would have at least 10,000-20,000 books easily. So that's how good American public library system is. And not only the America has the public library system, they have something called memorial library, such as Nixon Library, just nearby here in Lordland, right? And the other, most presidents in recent years, they have their memorial library. So that's how this library, public library, is important. So public library, if you're a citizen or a resident of that particular city, or even if you're not a resident, you can go any public library in America, and it's free of charge usually. Right? You can borrow books and read it for a certain given time or period and return it, or even you can extend the amount of time, certain amount of time, twice or three times, and then you can return without any charge. And you can go into the library and do the research and take the books out and read it free of charge. So that means it's readily available as long as you have time and desire to go and study. And the public libraries, they keep the range of the books from all different subjects of interest. And the best library system in America, maybe in world, is the Congressional Library in Congress in Washington, D.C. They have almost all the publication ever published in America and in English usually. And they even have books in other languages. So Library of Congress is the standard. It's the standard for the public library system, and you can easily access the bibliography of books in the Library of Congress. That's usually the standard for us researchers. So that's so much about the public library. And then there's something called the Christian library. Christian libraries are usually in the so-called Christian schools, Christian institutions. For example, Harvard was Princeton. These are the these used to be the Christian Library of America. Now they are both Christian and secular, but it used to be the most famous and most prestigious Christian libraries. And usually the universities, Christian universities and the colleges, they have this Christian libraries. And the Christian libraries usually carry the books that are related Christian topics. And if you're doing a topic that's related the Christian religion or faith, and then life and so on, you're likely go to the Christian library rather than the public one, because they have a more focused and the books that are related to your subject of interest. For example, if you're doing study on like a biblical leadership, then I would go to a Christian library rather than the public ones. And they have much more material on the Christian leadership than a public library would have. Then we have, these days in 21st century, we have good online library. And many times we ought to have free access to the contents of those books that we are researching on online, even though you may not be able to print that out into the hard copy. They'll make you read the soft copy free of charge. So for us doing the research, it is a good tool. It's a good tool to use, because not only is fast, you don't have to go to physical library to travel and do all these efforts. You just click the book, type out the name of title of book and the author, and it is there. And many of these Christian library, for example, the Fuller Theological Seminary, or the school I studied, Golden Gate Seminary, and then William Carey International University, they do have their online library system, and you'll be able to access those. Sometimes they require you to have certain ID and password, but you can obtain those free of charge. And if you're a student, of course you can access those online libraries free and with your student ID. So these days, the online library becomes more of the tool than the physical libraries. So still, these are like an institutional library research. So what do you do at these libraries? You do pre-research. Let's say you're studying biblical leadership, and you're interested in this, and you want to do some particular writing on this. But before you go to particular topic and subject, you want to do some pre-research, and then you want to study, what's available. So that's called a pre-research. You want to know how many books are written, by whom, and when, and what are some of the trends these days. Like, again, you go to journal and you find the most recent trends on the biblical leadership. So, it won't take that much time to do the pre-research. Once you do the pre-research, and then you're going to make selections, because you're not going to use all the books available there on the topic, because you're going to do the more specific research than general, say, biblical leadership. Okay, let's say we're studying the leadership of Moses in book of Exodus. Now you narrow down your research topic a lot more. And you want to write down more to the in the Moses leadership, you want to look at the administrative system, how he divided, how he ran the council, how he made the decisions, and so on. So that narrows down even further. Once you have the narrowed down topics of the research or the target, then you ought to be able to make those selections. So the pre-research kind of guides you to the possibility of the research. If there are no books written on this, then you're going to be the pioneer on the topic. But I'm sure with this kind of category and narrowing down, you will find several relevant books or journals that are related to particular narrowed down topics. And then you have made your selection of books. And then you begin to list the bibliography. They're writing down the relevant books and journals and other articles and so on. By doing it, you build up your bibliography. That's very important process in doing a library research. You want to mark down the title of the book, the author, and then publisher. This is a basic the information. In the old days, you had to make this card, library cards, so-called, or the reference card or bibliography cards, and write down all this information by hand, by yourself. But today, there's very good system. And there's several programs that are designed to help you to the research. I'm not going to go further into this because those are needed when you're doing the master or the doctoral kind of research. But still, you can just copy the those, and then Amazon and Google, all these good search engines, they provide automatic kind of bibliography forms, standard. So you can use those. It's easier, much easier these days. Then you are going to actually locate those resources, the contents itself. Because the title and the author is not just enough. You don't know what's in it. You want to go into it and find what's in it. What's the first thing that you do? You go through the contents, or the list of contents or outlines, and every book, good written book, has those contents, and you look at the list of contents and see whether this book contains the material that you want to study. The thing is, if you find a book, you may find only 10% of the contents, or one just little tiny one title under the main chapter that is relevant to your subject. Still, that book is valuable because it deals with the subject that you're interested in. And then you're checking out those contents, and you know that this book does have the contents that I want to study and read. Then focus and edit. That comes as you develop your writing. So we'll go further that into the later. Anyway, so that's how you narrow down your topics and subject, and then find out what are some materials that are relevant. So you have to have a certain focus, and then the goal. So the key to being able to go through this process without difficulty would be narrowing down your topic as much as possible. This would be a good example of topic for a dissertation even at the doctoral level. Of course, this will be a good topic from the master level, but it would be a good topic for a doctoral level, which requires 200 to 400 pages plus for the dissertation. These days, they do not require the amount of writing, but the quality of writing in doctoral level, also in the master level. So to have a good and the better quality of research, academic research, it is important to narrow it down as much as possible without losing the integrity of the research itself. So that's the advice that I can give. And okay, let's take a short break, and we'll continue this discussion. Okay, let us continue. So we did how to do the research with the institutional. Okay, personal library. Every good scholar and good student would have books of their own. Some of the books you want to have it yourself, so you buy books. And people I know, some of the pastors that I know, some of the professors that I know, he has like 30,000 books. 30,000 books, that's a lot. That's much more than some of the schools may have. And they have their own personal library. And usually us would have 1,000 books. That would be a lot for any students to have a personal private library. When you're becoming a good student of a given subject, when you're coming to college, if you're at the college level, you would have the area of interest. Then you go to graduate school. Not only you're interested, you're trying to begin to develop expertise. Then if you're a doctoral level, certainly you would have narrowed down various subject that you want to study. For me, for example, myself, I began my doctoral research on the biblical leadership in the Fuller Theological Seminary with the famous Dr. Robert Clinton. He is one of the leading scholar and professor in the study of Christian leadership at the time. Now he's retired, but he was the world-known authority on the subject. And then I studied leadership under him. And my focus was more on the leadership, developing the student leadership for the college students, for the Christian students. And then at William Carey, my focus was on missiology, the study of mission, the Christian mission, and my dissertation was on the mission through diaspora Christians. So that was my focus. And that's pretty much narrowed down. So I can say I'm an expert on the Christian, the mission by Christian diaspora. Just like myself, who was living in America. I was Christian before I come to America, and I do identify myself as a missionary. So that's kind of position that you put yourself. And when you do that, you know what to have in your private personal library and what not to have. So you focus yourself on the books that has to do with the leadership. So anything that is relevant to the Christian leadership that you want to have in your own shelf, your own library. And then you begin to build up system. interested in the Christian leadership, you're only buying the books that are related to this, but you are buying some other books, and you may have some other uh, books as well. So you kind of need to have a system, way of classifying and locating your books. And if you only have like 100 books, it's not going to be that much an issue. But if you have 500, 1,000 books, or 30,000 books, like some the pastor that I know, that you eventually need to have a good system. So you are going to kind of design your own system. But the thing is, it should be easy to find and locate. So either by subject, or by the author, or you can do it by alphabetical order. Whatever suits you, you should build your own system. Virtual library. I talked about the virtual library. There's famous like a wiki, Google Scholar, and online access to the institutional library. Like I said, for the theological seminary, you can go and then access many of the books there. And then there are some of the websites that help you to do the reference work, especially the biblical reference work. You have like a Bible Gates, Bible Hub. These are some of the English for the English speaking people, and then these are free of charge and very well organized, in depth, and scholastic system. So you have to be thankful if you're a student of theology, or pastor who's doing the ministry. There are these tools who has given their full lifetime to develop this material, the resources, and they put it on a free of charge, because they want you to also save time and effort and doing your research. So you can use these websites, especially for the references. Okay, let's go to next topic. Doing an academy reading, lesson 5. As you try to do the academic research, reading becomes the major part of your research, as much as a library research is the major part of research. When you go to a library, whether it's online or a physical one, you need to do the reading. And depending on the level of the study, you are required to do certain number of pages reading for your research, especially the academic institution like ours, the college. There is certain level of amount of reading that is required. The doctoral level I studied, Each topic would require several thousand pages of reading per each class. So the reading becomes a very key critical component of your academic research. So there is no way still, with all this technology and development, there is no way that you can avoid reading and doing research. So the reading skills is the key to a good research. When I say a reading skill, it does not mean that how much you are going to read. No, let's talk about this. Reading as a discipline. Reading itself is a very key discipline any student or researcher or scholar has to acquire. It's a training. It takes an effort. It takes an exercise. So it is a labor. It's a labor. I mean, people talk about the physical labor, but intellectual labor is probably as much difficult as a physical labor. It's not that much painful. It doesn't take physical energy, but using your brain, it's quite a labor. It's probably more stressful. And if you have done some research, you know what I'm talking about. And unless you enjoy this, even though you enjoy the academic exercise, it's still, reading is a labor. Someone like myself who doesn't have a good eyesight, reading is a very, very difficult labor. So the key is to start early, meaning young age, when you want to begin reading as a child, 2 or 3 years old. Help them to begin to read. And earlier the better. So start early and you develop not the skills, but the habit of reading. That's important. So habit building is a key to a good reading discipline. Books on hands. Yeah, you should have books on hands wherever you go, whenever. You should have a habit of carrying a book. I wasn't able to build that kind of habit, but I strongly recommend anyone who's younger than me, just begin to try to have that habit of carrying a book wherever, whenever. How much or how well? For the research purpose, academic research, it's not how much you read, it's how well you're reading. But to develop that skill of how the well reading, you need to starting reading a lot. So by reading a lot, then you eventually will develop the skill to do the well reading. Well reading is different from reading a lot. So what is a well reading well? But before we go into the well reading, this non-academic reading is usually it's for pleasure. You read a novel, you read essays, you read poetry, and these are for pleasure. And there's no pressure. You don't have to read a certain amount of books or the given amount in a given time. So there's no pressure. And then it's probably you may not need any documentation. It's not required, even though you may do some documentation if you like, but it is not required. So that's kind of non-academic reading. If you read the comic books, no, you do it for the pleasure. But when it comes to an academic reading, it's a different story. You're reading with a purpose. You have goals. You have the reason for that reading. That's academic reading. And you're trying to find something, to get something. And you have to, you need to. And it's kind of mandatory. And you are going to have certain focus, because not all the contents of a given book or journal or article even would relate to the purpose or the goals that you're set to study or research. So when you're doing an academic reading, there's certain focus. That means you're going to edit. You're going to throw away certain part that's not necessary and try to find something that is relevant, meaningful, and valuable. So it becomes so-called selective reading. That's a very important word, selective reading. The skill is well reading or reading well depends on how you're going to select certain content and how you're going to avoid reading certain portion of the contents. So that means not all the contents are the same, even though the books are a certain amount of pages, and within even a chapter or even a page, you're trying to get the things that you need. Rest of them is like a trash, even though it's not trash itself. For you, it's going to be trash. It's not necessary. You don't want to carry all those. It's like if you're traveling, you don't carry whole household items. No, you don't do that. You have a just amount of the luggage to carry, the bag, and then you can just put certain amount of things in your luggage, and then you have to do the selection. Which one do I take? Which one do I throw away? So that's kind of the same thing that apply to academic research and reading, academic reading. So it becomes a selective reading than reading the entire book. So how do you do that? You're doing the scan and sweeping. The sweeping means that you are going to put out some trash. I use the word trash, so it will be vivid. But scan, it means you're going over first what you do over the contents, the very first portion of the book. It lists what's the things that are discussed. Non-academic books, it's not that easy to scan. But academic books on the topics and subjects, they do state certain topics of discussion. So it's much easier for anyone, the reader, to identify the topics that you need and avoid the topics that you don't need. So the first thing is to scan through the outline or the contents, the list of the contents, and then decide which is going to be the chapter or the pages that you are going to read. That's the very first thing, first scan. And then you go into the actual chapter or the portion, the page that you are looking into. And what you do is let's say this is a given page 205.9. So you go to that particular page, and then you find there's something called a subtitle. Each chapter, and you know, it ought to have certain level of title. So those are subtitles. Look at the subtitle, and then select the portion of paragraph. When you come to a paragraph, the way to scan is read the first sentence and the last sentence. By doing so, you will be able to determine whether this paragraph is going to be relevant to your topic of discussion or study or not. You don't need to read through the whole paragraph. And if they seems to be relevant, then you are going to read the whole paragraph. So the way to do is under the subtitle that seems to be relevant, even you are selecting the chapters and then the sentences that are going to be relevant to your study. So that's the way that you scan. Once you scan, then you go into the in-depth reading. In-depth reading is reading the entire contents, not once, but 2 or 3 times. And then you begin to make documentation, the notes. So that's, again, the notes and records. So when you're doing the research, we already discussed the documentation in the previous lesson. And so the importance of documentation. Number one, you're not going to be able to remember. That's period. Even with a very smart, good memory person, you are limited. And you're not going to be able to remember 90% of what you read yesterday. So it is key and important to make the notes, at least the notes. So these notes, later it become a big paper. That's how it happens. So notes become a big paper. That's principle. Without notes, it is really, really difficult to write even a sentence. So note the keywords. You write, it becomes a sentence, and those sentences become a paragraph, and the paragraph develop into chapter. So it is critical and mandatory and a must that you make the notes of what you're reading. Because without these notes, you're not going to be able to write anything at all. I tell you again. So notes become a draft. How do you build a draft? Let me give you just a quick example. When you have these several notes under category of your topic. So let's just say Moses in the Exodus administrative system. And you say elders. Your topic is about elders. And you read this journal about Moses, how Moses dealt with elders. And you just make the notes. And then it becomes one outline about elders and eldership. So that's how you begin your draft. And then you have another section about you find the things that how Moses dealt with a woman, for example, and then you find the notes in some relevant books that you read, and then it becomes again one chapter or one sub chapter about the topic. So that's how you develop your draft. And when you do that, you need to build a system. How do you build a system? By writing your own outline for the research or research paper. So your outline becomes a system. So with a computer, now it's much easier. You just write them, edit them, and shift them. It's much easier. Just copy, cut, paste, and you can do that, right? So you can build the system of folders. You know how to do the folders in computer, so I don't need to explain it. So top folder, sub folders, and then another subfolders within the folders. That's how you begin to build your draft. And then later you just paste them into one larger paper. Resourcing. You want to learn how to do, this is a key to a researcher, resourcing. Without doing the resourcing, you're not be able to do any research. So again, we'll go to the just list. It doesn't need the explanation. Books, media, newspaper, magazines, online sources, and your colleagues. Colleagues are very important resources, many times ignored or disregarded. But the conversation that you have on the topic or related topics with your colleagues, that's going to be a very important resource. Because that person may know the things that you may not be aware of. So people resource is very important element in your academic study. Even some think, just books are enough. No, that's not the case. People that you're studying with, they become a good resource. If you go to master and doctoral levels, you are gathered, concentrated with the people who are interested in the similar subject. For example, the leadership, the biblical Christian leadership. Under Dr. Clinton, Robert Clinton, there were several students who are doing the dissertation study, the doctoral study. So when we come to the class, we become the resources for one another. So that's where the resources are. The referencing. This is where many of the Asian students have some issues. There's something called a perjury, meaning that you're copying someone else's idea without giving the credit to that person. In our culture, used to be, in our culture, if you learn something from someone else, when it becomes your knowledge that you don't think it was necessary for you to, give the names. See, it's not customed. The knowledge is common good for us, Asians. It's not something that you claim to own. But in Western culture, the knowledge and the idea and the creativity are considered as a possession. It is an asset, meaning it's something of value that you can buy and sell. That was never an idea for us who grew up in Asia. So in our DNA, in our culture, it's something hasn't thought of, and it is kind of strange and unaccustomed. It's not normal and natural for us to think the knowledge as something of possession or asset. But it is in Western culture. So to do the academic work, we should respect. We are studying in American institution, so it is proper for us to respect this design and this system. So you're trying to find, not only trying to find the references, but you want to give a proper credit to these references. Whether it's a previous work someone has done before you, and it is done for me because I'm studying it, whether he or she did not know, they don't know me personally, but they've done some work for me. So it is proper for me to give that credit because they worked for it. They gave hours and the time and the energy and even the money for their effort. And it is, as being a part of an academic community that you're in, it is proper to give the proper respect as references. And it not only you're giving the credential to them, it gives a benefit to you because it provides that authenticity and the authority. In any academic work that we do, these two words, the authority and authenticity, is important because it doesn't come out of you until you are recognized as one of the top authority and expertise yourself. Most of us are still a student. We're still in the process of learning. Until you are claimed to have some PhD on the given topic. So until then, you have to rely on someone else's authority and expertise to claim yours to be having that authority, because it doesn't come out of yourself. So for those reasons, it is proper for us to cite, make it clearly cite those references. I emphasize this because for, again, us Asians who grow up in our culture, we are not accustomed to, and easily we can make the mistake of not intentional, but make it up that perjury. So I think our time is up, and yeah, we should conclude this discussion here. We do have some still in your textbook that need to be discussed, and you can do probably your own study on those subject and topics. And thank you again for being the students on this lecture and coming every week to listen to it and be part of this academic community. And hope to see you in some other classes. And thank you, everyone, and goodbye.